I was just having a brief conversation off air with our next guest, and it reminded me of some things about my childhood growing up in the 1960s and 1970s. And one of those was some of the other guys in the neighborhood and I decided to build some ramps, and we took those ramps to the local park. It was a few blocks from our house, and we put the ramps up by the basketball court, and then we would attempt to jump our bicycles on the ramps and come down on the other side. The guys who actually had the old banana bikes, the seats that looked like the big bananas, they did pretty well. Those of us who had more traditional bikes didn't do quite so well, and this lasted for a few days. We would take the ramps down there until our parents discovered when we were coming home with cuts and bruises and scrapes that something was going on, and then they suddenly prohibited that activity, and that was the end of that. But we did that because we were following the lead of one of our heroes, and if you're of a certain generation, the name Evil Knievel reminds you of Sunday afternoons in Wide World of Sports and some of the jumps. Snake River Canyon, of course, being popular around here, the one that probably best known, but also Las Vegas, Wembley Stadium in England. And we're joined on the telephone right now here on Top Story with Bill Colley on News Radio 1310 KLIX and NewsRadio1310.com by Kelly Knievel. He is Evil Knievel's oldest son. And first of all, welcome to the program.
Hey, thank you, Bill.
When you,
I'm glad to be talking to everybody in Twin Falls.
Hey, thank you. When you do these calls and you travel around the country and you do meet people who probably like me are in their late 40s or early 50s, the stories I'm sure you hear are almost identical everywhere you go.
Well, you know what? I just got back from London, England, and what is really amazing to me is here. It's been 40 years since my dad jumped at Wembley Stadium in London, England. And the amount of enthusiasm and awe and inspiration that he created is just hard for me to imagine still to this day. I mean, I got in a cab, and the cab driver, once he recognized my name, said, "Oh, is Evil Knievel your father?" He goes, "I was at Wembley Stadium when he jumped at Wembley Stadium," and he proceeded to recite every single word of my dad's speech that day. I mean, word for word, he did it. 40 years later. So it just continues to amaze me the inspiration that my dad inspired.
You know, as a kid growing up, I mean, those of us who got to watch all of it on TV, and it was these were events, and it was thrilling for all of us. It was the only thing I think that was bigger in sports, or well, maybe not bigger, about equal, was when there would be an Ali fight on TV. That would generate the same interest as one of your father's stunts, and yet you got to see it personally. I mean, you were often there, right? You were in the middle of all of this and the screaming crowd and everything else going on.
Well, on the ABC Wide World of Sports shows that are ranked in history, Evil Knievel has the number one show. That was after he crashed at Wembley. He came back to Kings Island and jumped 14 buses. And then Muhammad Ali has the next two spots, and then Evil Knievel's got the fourth spot again. So between the two of them, I guess they were the two most famous people in the United States. And when we were at the jumps, it was, I mean, we were kids. We were just as enthralled as everyone else.
All of the merchandising that went on, and at Christmas time, my next-door neighbor, a guy named Blair Emerson, your dad was his biggest hero, and at Christmas time one year when he got actually the motorcycle with the figure of your father sitting atop it, and they came with, I think, with tiny ramps. He thought that was we must have been about 12 years old at the time. He thought that was perhaps the greatest gift that he had ever received, and I think he eventually just wore it out from using it.
Well, at the time, you know, that was the most biggest selling toy in the history of the toy industry. And when you really think about it, I mean, my dad really started the licensing business. He really started this whole phenomenon of sports people and celebrities putting their names on T-shirts and products. And I mean, really, he's the one who started all of that. So when you really think about the impact he's had on America, I mean, it's quite amazing.
You want to talk a little bit about his background, too, as well. I mean, here's a small-town guy or from a small city in Montana, and yet he comes up with some of these ideas all on his own, really to support the family. It shows you an ingenuity that, you know, when someone really needs to do something, necessity, that they can be very creative.
Listen, I think it could only happen in the United States of America, and my dad was born to be somebody. I mean, my dad was going to go out and be famous, and I mean, he tried a number of things before he settled on his motorcycle career. He was an insurance salesman. I mean, he sold more insurance policies in the state of Montana than anyone. He went to the mental institution and sold them all life insurance policies when he was a young man. And then he saw an auto thrill show one day, and then he decided he could do that on motorcycles. So his first jump, I mean, his first jump was when he was 27 or 28 years old. And it was over 2 pickup trucks at the Indio Date Festival in California. And he must have looked out into the audience and saw the reaction on people's faces, and then he just built it from there. And really, in the span of 6 or 7 years, I mean, he became one of the most famous people in the world in just 6 or 7 years by himself, just out of his own determination and imagination and creativity and guts and character. And I mean, that's really quite an accomplishment.
Yeah, I remember my dad taking me to see a Joey Chitwood show at the county fair when I was a kid, and it's the most clever use of El Caminos I've ever seen. That's what they were using in the late 60s. For a lot of the stunts that they were involved with. But a motorcycle doesn't offer that safety because you don't have anything around you.
No, my dad, I mean, he made probably 175 jumps. People forget how hard my dad worked. I mean, he loaded his own ramps and drove his truck from county fair to county fair. And, I mean, he was jumping every single weekend. He probably made 175 jumps. And, of course, it's those 11 or 12 times he fell off that made him so famous.
In a sense, people came to see that danger. I mean, success is great too, but they wanted to see him bounce back up after taking one of those tumbles.
Well, there's something involved in that. You know, it's not like my dad was an actor or a singer. What my dad did was real, and it was raw. And I think it's just what the country needed at the time, and he wore the red, white, and blue stripes, and what he did and said was real, and I think that really appealed to people. There was nothing fake about what my dad did.
Our guest is Kelley Knievel. He's the oldest son of Evel Knievel. 9:14 on our program, 73. Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX, and newsradio1310.com. Always a lot of talk here in Twin Falls about someone coming back and maybe trying to repeat the jump. And what I remember is he did get across, but because the chute deployed early, it dragged him back. And so someone always says they're going to come by and they're going to try to complete that jump. What do you know about that? Is there still any possibility, or is it always just in the talking stage?
Well, about the original jump that my dad did, you know, both of the test rockets landed right in the middle of the canyon. So the wind just happened to be blowing that day, just hard enough. It just blew them back to where the rocket landed right where there was a little sandbar that met the edge of the canyon and kind of toppled over. And I mean, I think he was relieved as anyone on the planet, for crying out loud, that he was able to come back from, because he really didn't know if he would live or die during that attempt or not. There's a ramp up on the north rim of the canyon now, and there's a Hollywood stuntman that's talking about it. But, I mean, there's a lot involved. He's going to use the original equipment that my dad used at the time. I mean, it's a dangerous thing, so I'm sure he's trying to figure out how he's going to get himself over that canyon.
I will say this. I don't think it will ever quite have the attention of that day, because a lot of people, we didn't find out until the following day that Richard Nixon had been pardoned, because everyone was talking about your dad's attempt that day. And I think that someone trying to repeat that can never quite, it's like you never can quite get the same sense again. It was such a huge cultural phenomenon at the time.
Well, there's nothing like the original, but there's a whole new generation of kids out there that at least that they'll. I mean, my dad inspired all these guys like Travis Pastrana and Tony Hawk and Matt Hoffman and all these things that kids do nowadays in extreme sports. So there's a whole generation of people out there that really are going to understand that all their heroes got their inspiration from Evel Knievel. And really, if they can see and learn about the history of Evel Knievel and what a truly unique character he was, and if they can see that in someone doing a Snake River Canyon shot, I mean, it'll just let them know where their heroes came from.
I can remember being in the seventh grade, and the television movie came out about his life. The following day at school, the teachers had to quiet us all down because we were all talking about it. And there's that great scene where when he's supposedly a kid, there's a car accident. He picks up the headlight and tosses it back into the wreckage. Is that actually, did something like that actually happen?
My dad did a lot of crazy things when he was a teenager. I'm sure something like that did happen. But there's a new DVD out. It's called I Am Evel Knievel. And it's the first documentary that the family's ever I mean, there's been 10 documentaries done on my dad, but this is the first one that the family's ever been involved in. And there's really some big stars telling their stories about Evel Knievel, with Matthew McConaughey and Willie Davidson, owner of Harley Davidson, and Doug Wilson was the executive producer on ABC Wide World of Sports, and Michelle Rodriguez and Kid Rock. And I mean, there's really some really good stories about my dad that no one has ever seen before. And you can you can go to Amazon and buy the DVD.
And what's the title of it again?
It's called I Am Evel Knievel. And
what's the cost?
It's inexpensive. Cheaper than a movie ticket, I can tell you. I can tell you that much.
I just curious myself, because I know a lot of people may be looking it up within a few minutes after hearing about it on the show. And
it's really good. It's the first one that the family's ever participated in.
By the way, some of your family have managed to become daredevils themselves. I take it
you're only one of us,
right? You've led somewhat of a quieter life.
Yeah.
What do you do other than just, at this point of your life? I mean, I know obviously it's important to get this video promoted, and it's very special to you, obviously, because of the love you had for your father. But what keeps you busy at this stage?
Well, I've got a construction company in Las Vegas, Nevada, and I own the Evel Knievel brand. So along with the rest of my siblings, so my brother's the daredevil, Robbie's the daredevil, and I fell off a couple times when I was young, and I got all the scars to prove it, and I figured, oh, my God, my brother's way better at this than I am, so there's just no need for me to get involved in this daredevil business.
Well, Kelley Knievel, I'd like to thank you very much for the time this morning. We'll all be looking up that video online, and makes a great gift, too, I'm sure, for a lot of people of my age, and hope you have a great summer and wish you the best.
Hey, thank you, and we'll see you guys sometime during the next year.
All right, take care.
All right, thanks, Bill.
Kelley Knievel joining us this morning on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. This is Top Story. Love to have him on the air. I mean, the stories, again, I'll be 53 in October. There were very few things that are such a huge part of my life or my childhood that can compare to what his father was at the time. Just iconic. I mean, that's the best way to describe it. 20 minutes after 9 o'clock, 74. Hey, we've got plenty more coming up in just a few minutes. I just want to point out that that really enjoyed talking to our previous guest. It's occasionally nice on late in the week to get a break from some of all the bad news. And if you think back, for a lot of us, Evel Knievel just simply represents a far better time in America. And he was such an unabashed patriot. And no one questioned it about him. If you are today, I mean, you think about how a strong American patriot and Christian like Tim Tebow is treated by media. Now, he's not as successful as what he does, as Evel Knievel was. But times have so changed, I don't know that Knievel today could be accepted like he was by such a large mass of the population when I was a kid growing up. 75, 924, Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. You can reach our program by calling 736-0300, and you're on the air with Bill Colley on Top Story.
Bill, there's so many topics.
Yes.
But since you want to keep it light.
No, we can, anything you want, but go ahead.
I'm going to be 54 this year, so I'm with you. And I've got scars to prove it. But the thing is that no one's topped Evel Knievel yet. No one.
Right.
Not even his own son. I don't care if they've jumped farther. I don't care if they jumped more cars or anything else because they've always done it with a 200-pound lightweight Japanese bike. Evel Knievel never jumped one of those bikes. He always used like a Harley or something like that, which is 3 times the weight. So until they do that, they haven't beat him, or they never even matched what he did.
Yeah, and certainly too, just the he went out there every time, realizing I might not come back from this, and yet he was so chipper about it. And then after the hospital stays, it just only embellished, or I mean, it made him such a larger than life figure. And then he'd come right back and not brag, but just simply state how many bones he broke and say, "All right, I'm going to go do it all over again."
Yeah, well, I think was it a 5-year anniversary or something like that, where he was down at the Magic Valley Mall with his rocket, and I got to shake his hand, and he was really nice and everything else, and I thought it was a real cool thing.
I understand that when he returned to the mall a few years ago, that he actually roared down one of the aisles of the mall on the motorcycle down into the courtyard area, and so he could greet everybody there. That must have made some tremendous noise, but it must have also been a thrill for a great many people, even a lot of the younger kids who had no idea who he was probably up until that point.
Right. You have a lot of people that complain about the problems that occurred, but they don't talk about some of the successes of their occurrence and some of the income that came in from it. So, I mean, I don't know. The problems we had last year with trying to launch the deal, I just couldn't understand. I mean, there's just no reason for it.
Well, I thank you much for the call, sir. I'm going to squeeze another caller in here this half hour of the program, coming up on a break in about 3 minutes. And by the way, just before I get to the caller, I was talking to Penny Main the other day, and she was sharing that during that jump in 1974, she was working at a hotel. And believe me, there weren't anywhere near as many hotel rooms in this area at the time. And she said it worked out well for her. She said people were giving her $50 tips just so they could come in and sit down and rest in a chair in the lobby. And she said in one day, she walked home with probably hundreds and hundreds of dollars, worried, of course, that you don't carry that much cash around usually. You're on the air with Bill Colley on News Radio 1310 KLIX at newsradio1310.com.
Yeah, good morning, Bill. Unlike you, I'm 76 years old, and I have a few scars too, but Bobby Knievel built his ramp almost in my backyard when I lived over on the Snake River Canyon rim. And I had the opportunity to watch him go out there in Qualls Field and push up the big pile of dirt. And then I watched him build the big iron ramp on the top of the pile of dirt. And then I had the opportunity to watch his very first test firing. And they took the steam-powered rocket and put it up on the ramp, and they shot it. And the parachute opened just a few feet off the end of the ramp, and it floated down into the river where Mike Green picked it up with his boat and brought it back up. They repaired a little tiny bit of damage that was caused to it. And then a short time later, they did another test firing and invited the news media to come out and watch the test firing. And I watched the rocket shoot up the ramp. The parachute opened just a few feet off the end of the ramp. And then once again, it floated down into the Snake River where Mr. Green picked it up with his boat and brought it back up. Well, then the big day came when all of the people arrived to watch the big thing, and I was standing on my back patio when Bobby Knievel flew underneath the Perrine Bridge in his Learjet, roared over the top of the crowd as they all went insane and was happy. And then he came out in the limo and proceeded to get into the rocket. And a great big, huge $500,000 motorhome came up from the Salt Lake Times, and they wanted to stand there and film it from my property. And they were all prepared to do that when Knievel's group got a hold of them and said, if you will not film this, we will provide for you film that we're taking for it so that you can use that. And so they decided they would go along with him, and they rolled their cameras down off the top of the motorhome, put them away.
Make it quick because we're running out of time.
Okay, the thing was that I did film it with my 16mm camera,
Wow.
And the day that the firing took place, the rocket went up the ramp with Bobby Knievel in it. The parachute opened just a few feet off the end of the ramp, and just exactly had it done the 2 times before and floated down into the river. There was never any point where he even came close to going across the canyon.
Well, okay, got that point across. Thank you. Hard break coming up.